Anyway, hello, no further ado. This is big part of our message in ASQ's Innovation Division. Quality professionals should play an important role in an organization's innovation programs and punta basta. There's a familiar, it might be a familiar name to some of you on this opening slide, and that is Baldrige. I'm not going to Baldrige you. I'm not going to over Baldrige this this crowd, but there are some really, really valuable tenets and practices in the Baldrige National Quality Award. And in this case, we want to apply it to what we're talking about is design thinking, and why I got the idea to do this. And I'm a little nervous tonight because this is, it's kind of new material. But why I wanted to do this is because there's a lot of, interest. It's quite a sexy and topical, theme, design thinking. But how do you get started? That was the thing that got my attention on this a couple of weeks ago when I first, a couple of months ago really, to think, okay, this design thinking, how do you get started? What's the first thing you do? And what does it mean? And what does it mean to me? And maybe some of you have even been a part of a design thinking exercise, and maybe some of you have led a design thinking exercise. That would be great. I would love to hear from you what works for you as well. And I'll give you the opportunity to do that here in just a second. We are going to cover a little bit of ground in the next hour about, it's just a little bit of an introduction, about another focal point at the intersection of quality management and innovation management. Right, there's going to be another focal point in that at that crossroads, and I have a background that kind of lends itself to this because I'm not a design thinking expert. And matter of fact, I didn't set out to be a quality person. As many of you probably are in a similar situation. Quality is not always the thing when you're in high school or even early in college saying, you know what, I want to work in quality. That is the place to be. Now, for some of you, maybe it was your calling. Maybe you felt it deep in your gut. I'm going to make first-time quality a priority in my life, But a lot of us found our way into it indirectly. I always think of the story of Ashley Hatfield, who's the chair of the ASQ Columbus section, saying that, yeah, when I wasn't doing this kind of work, but when I met Amy Wendling, who was the chair of the Columbus section, she said she showed me quality and how important it is, and I was instantly hooked. And that's probably the way it is for a lot of us. We kind of got hooked and got into it, and we started to learn and then evolve and then share. Some of you maybe have been able to even present material. Some of you have probably been able to present material or write an article. I've been able to write a couple of articles. This is not self-congratulatory. I'm coming up to a point later in this where I'll tie this all together. But I have had the good fortune to be published in Quality Progress magazine a couple times. And if you wanted to look at those stories, they're all these articles are about idea generation in the context of innovation, taking creativity, harnessing it, getting ideas from people who are sometimes willing to contribute their ideas and sometimes reluctant to contribute their ideas, but they still have ideas, and how can I get to them? So that's the focus of all these articles. One I wrote with my friend Caroline, another I wrote with my esteemed colleague, Nicole Radziwill, and then the third one I kind of went for it on my own. What I'm going to ask you, I'm going to give you a couple of diversions. You might get tired of hearing my voice for, a minute or two here and there. So I'm going to give you a couple of diversions to also focus on during this session. The first is at the bottom of this slide. If you're able to screen capture or retype, if you're able to go to that URL, and I will show you what it looks like. First, I'm going to ask you, let me know if this screen transitioned over to my Scrambler board, or is it still on the slideshow?
It's just open now.
Is it still on the slideshow, or when I flick this over here, does it go to this whiteboard?
It's not going to the whiteboard.
Okay, good. No problem. I'm going to do this. I'm going to brute force this. I've taken it off of the slideshow, and I'm going to show you the Scrambler location. What I would like for you to do is go to this URL. You'll see this site. where I'm going to ask you to post comments about this webinar, something good, something bad, doesn't matter what it is. You could say, this guy is a poser, or you could say, I'm going to put Tracy's picture up in my office. Whatever you want, you do it by clicking the plus sign on the bottom left. When you click that plus sign, it gives you a card. Drag the card up into this display space and type on it. Double click to type in it. Come on. And then put it anywhere you like, all right? So I'm going to ask you to do that while we're talking. I'm interested in your feedback. I told you this is kind of new material, so I'm looking for your feedback. So if you go to that Scrumbler site, I'll show you the URL again. Here. Come on, baby. There, scrumbler.ca/April 14 CJM for customer journey mapping. So let me proceed, please, with a description of what this presentation, really quick, what this presentation is not. It is not a push toward going and getting Baldrige certified, going to get a Baldrige Quality Award or even pursue it. It is a daunting, intense pursuit. I'm not encouraging that. I've selected a couple of points from Baldrige that can be helpful in getting out of the starting gate with design thinking, okay, or advancing a design thinking program that might be new to you and your organization. With regard to design thinking, it is not, again, this is not reserved for specialists, nor is it only for products. Now, there are a lot of products that have been created, built, conceived through design thinking type workshops, but it's not just for products. It can be for services, it can be for business models, you know, like anything else within innovation. It's not just for a product. Customer journey mapping, if that's a topic that you've heard of, I and others feel like it is underutilized. We can barely scratch the surface on customer journey mapping during a short webinar like this, but I will show you a couple things that might be helpful. It is always my intention in a webinar or a presentation to offer something that can be applied immediately. I want to show you something or another way of looking at something that you could go back to your desk tomorrow, or your home office tomorrow, and make this work, actually apply it. A couple more things this session is not. It is not by any stretch, it's not comprehensive. There's so much more to talk about in these topics, and if you have an interest in talking about this further, I would be happy to, you know, make contact and go to deeper levels of discussion on these topics. It is also, this presentation is also not fancy. I'm not trying to dazzle anybody. This is just some basics, just some bare bones. So if you've had a minute to jot down that Scrumbler URL, I'm definitely interested in your feedback during and after this event. Note that the Scrumbler site is not secure. It's out there in the public domain, so you might keep any personally identifiable information off the cards. Caveat emptor. As I mentioned, we always talk about innovation in the context of, in ASQ, we always talk about innovation, and certainly as meeting an unmet need, absolutely, addressing a customer's unmet need. And that the quality professional can and should be, you know, a part of that, but there might be some changes that the quality professional will want to make in order to become more valuable to their organization. So if we get on the leading edge of this, take initiative, be proactive, we can you know, invent the need for our assistance, for our support, right? So we took some notes at the, this was in Indianapolis, 2013 World Conference. I'm just coming out of my sadness funk that the World Conference has been removed from this year's calendar in May because it was here, Columbus. You know, any of you who are in Columbus with me, we were on the planning committee and we were going to make this happen, so it's quite sad. But I will talk about conferences before we hang up tonight. One more thing that I'll ask you to do, there's or give you the opportunity to do, you don't have to do it now, but you can if you'd like. There's a self-assessment that we have offered across our website. I don't think we've moved it to the My ASQ site. It was on our old Innovation Division site before. There is a URL at the bottom you can copy. There's also a quick response code you can take a picture of with your phone. It's not super mobile friendly. It's not necessarily a mobile friendly self-assessment, so it might be better to do it on the desktop. But I know your desktop is busy right now watching this presentation, so perhaps the phone might be a good medium for that. But later, I will ask you what I might have the opportunity to ask you what self-assessment style you came up with, and I'll show you what all of that is, right? So if you take that sometime in the next 30 minutes, that might be helpful. Good. Okay, so here's our agenda for this session that we have together. And then, Chris, I think we can exchange questions at the end with the Q&A feature in this conference webinar medium. So I'll definitely reserve some time for questions. But what we have is I want to go through principles of design thinking, which you may have seen, but I want to look at them through a Baldrige lens, which might be a little bit different than an approach that you have taken before. And it should help to simplify and make it more accessible. I will address a bit about customer journey mapping in order to find empathy, the first step of design thinking being empathize with your customer. And a customer journey map can be a good way to do that. Then we'll go into a little bit about collecting ideas and how that works, because like anything else, innovation is equal parts idea generation and execution. Without either, it is not innovation. Innovation is bringing something to that user. It's not just putting a good idea out there and then nothing happens to it. I'm going to not necessarily prescribe, but recommend a step-by-step approach to making either an improvement or, more likely in this context, addressing an unmet need, addressing a customer's unmet need. And then, of course, I still definitely urge everybody to use the resources that are available within the ASQ. I'm going to get started in our agenda with design thinking. These are the design thinking principles. They are well worn. There is no surprise here. If you've seen anything about design thinking, it's no mystery that these 6 items or these 5 items, would appear in this sequence. And the first being empathize before define, even before define, before saying what are we going to do and how are we going to do it as well as we can, or how are we going to do it better. Before even doing that, we want to understand who that customer is, what that customer wants, why that customer called us, right? What was their motivation to even call us? And you as a consumer, you have been through the experience many times where the person on the other end of that phone or across that counter from you doesn't seem like they have a clue as to what your underlying need really is. And this is why so many disconnects occur in that commercial space. How many times that in a B2C or even B2B environment, we're not selling a solution, we're just selling a product or a service, right? So we're going to empathize by finding out what is it that's important to our customer, not just what our customer is doing at any given time, right? Placing an order, visiting, shopping, looking at a website, browsing through the store, right, when the stores reopen. Not just what they're doing, but while they're doing that, what are they thinking and what are they feeling? That's a big part of it, and it seems a little touchy-feely, but that's a very important part of this. What is their motivation, so that I can help them with a solution, not just a one-time transaction. I can cement a relationship. Then we move into some of the more mechanical, define, outline that current situation, just like any quality project or process improvement project. We need to understand what's going on today or what's not going on today in order to be able to diagnose it and make things better. Then we're going to ideate. We're going to create options by challenging assumptions and coming up with many, many, many ideas. Right? Many ideas will often lead to at least one good one or a combination of good ones that we can explore. A big part of design thinking is this rapid prototype and test, and there can be many iterations of prototype and test. We're going to build something or model something, try to break it quickly, not over the course of several weeks or months, in service. We're going to accelerate the learning by prototype and test, trying to break it, refine the prototype, test it again. And once we have something that works, then we implement. Okay, we go ahead and deploy those solutions, whether it's a product or a service. Again, I'll stress this is not just about tangible things. It's not just about, you know, a better ink pen or a better mousetrap or a coffee mug that has a latte spoon in the handle. So design thinking principles, I hope there are no questions about this. There's plenty of material written about design thinking principles. What I want to share now is a little bit about Baldrige. So let me get a show of hands. Anybody never heard of Baldrige before? Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. It's about what I thought. Baldrige, I got 2 sections of Baldrige in this session this evening. This is the first part. When a Baldrige examiner is evaluating a process, any work process, at an applicant organization, Baldrige applicant organization, they evaluate the process using the ADLI sequence. The ADLI sequence. I'm going to explain this briefly for those of you who raised your hands who don't have don't have a lot of exposure to Baldrige. But the first part, and these are written in this order for a reason. The first part is your approach. A in ADLI is for your approach. So the Baldrige criteria comprises a set of questions. Baldrige is not prescriptive; it is a question format saying, what do you do? How do you engage your customers? How do you engage your suppliers? And then you answer the question, right? So if the question were, how do you engage your customers? What you do in order to address that item is known as your approach. And if you asked me, what do you do to engage your customers? And I said, we open chat rooms every month. On the 28th of every month, we open a chat room from 1 to 3 p.m. for customers to join us and talk. Right? We have chat rooms. Yeah. So my answer would be, we have chat rooms. Well, that's good. That's what you say you do. Okay, good. So I would write that down, and then I would ask somebody else at that organization, what do you do to engage your customers? And they might say, we have a focus group once every year. And then I might ask a third person, how do you engage customers? They might say, well, we just don't. Right? So there are different kinds of approaches listed there, including the absence of an approach. But the approach is not enough. What a Baldrige examiner will do is then ask you to prove it. Give me some details about how this approach is deployed, the D in ADLI being deployment. So they'll say, okay, interesting, focus groups or chat rooms once a month. Tell me, how do you do that? They say, well, we send an email to 1 quarter of our client list on the first of the month with a link to join the chat room on the last of the month. Okay, great. That's deployment. How do you do it? And further, prove it to me that you actually do that. So it's not enough to say what you do and say how you do it. You have to prove it to me. So when a Baldrige examiner would visit your location, they would say, let me see the results of your last several chat room sessions. Okay. And then, so that's approach and deployment, what and how. Without the what, the what alone is not enough. There needs to be a how. In every case, there needs to be what and how. Then further, digging deeper for a higher score or a richer experience, the learning is next, which is how are we going to get feedback from the deployment of our approach in order to make our approach and the deployment of it better next time, right? So the learning is cycles of learning, feedback to make it better. And then integration is a broad category where there are often lots of opportunities for improvement, but it's about the consistency of your approaches. If one group does focus groups once a quarter and another group does chat rooms once a month, there's a little bit of inconsistency there, apparent inconsistency. They might have good reasons for it. And then the one group said they do nothing. So we're looking for integration of the customer experience, in this case, consistency among deployments, and consistency among learning within different functional areas of the business, et cetera. So the ADLI approach alone is a really good way to look at a work process. When you say, how do you do something? Well, just saying what you do is not enough. You have to prove that it's deployed, that you're learning from it, and that it is integrated. That's what Baldrige is looking for. So if I take ADLI and match it up to the design thinking principles, then I think we have something that we can work with. I think we have something that makes this whole empathize, define, ideate maybe a little simpler, maybe a little more accessible. Again, is what I'm going for, because this empathize and define is really talking about for our workshop, now not for our, our whole business, but for this workshop, for this design thinking workshop, the approach then is what are our customers' unmet needs? This is what are we going to address? It answers the question what are we going to be addressing? And then generating ideas is now talking about how. I mentioned the what and the how. There's always the what and the how. So what are we going to address? How can we address them? This is coming up with ideas. And of course, prototyping and testing, that's learning. That's learning what we're doing, how to make it better, iterative, how are we going to make this better, and then refine it until finally we get to the point where we're ready to implement and we're going to integrate with a 360-degree view to make sure that it's fully deployed, fully launched when it's ready. So I don't know if this is, what I've done is used ADLI as an approach. I don't know if it's something that everybody would be inclined to do, but it has worked for me, and I'll show you what I mean. Let me proceed. When you're putting together a design thinking workshop, it is good to have a defined, manageable scope, a tightly scoped target process or unmet need that you're trying to map and understand and solve. Something like a large scope would be map the full customer life cycle. That might be desirable. You might be very interested in that, and with the best of intentions want to say, I want to see the whole customer life cycle. That's a big job. That can be a really big job, and I've been around organizations that have tried to do that, and you quickly learn we could be here all day, we could be here all month. But a more manageable scope might be something tightly defined. Let's map the e-commerce transaction for a first-time purchase, okay, which I'll show you a picture of one that's similar to that. I have a client organization that is actually doing an activity like this now. Right? So bite-sized, digestible, and isn't that similar to what we try to do in improvement projects? I mean, we build FMEA, we build project charters with a scope that is manageable, not grandiose and difficult to digest. The design thinking workshop, and there's an image here of the shopping cart story from ABC Nightline with the IDEO organization. Maybe some of you have watched this. I encourage you. It's out on YouTube. It's been out there for years, where they bring in people, some designers and some citizens and some contributors, to divide into teams, and they make it competitive, gamify it, make it fun, to come up with a different kind of shopping cart. And they end up with this modular, it has a hook if you have a handbag. One of those modules could be an infant seat, right? So it's quite an interesting story. It's only 8 minutes long. I encourage you to watch that. But a typical design thinking workshop will have many rounds of prototyping and testing, and they are typically built around a product, something tangible, something you're going to touch and push and move, and fold. And that's right, but it doesn't have to be, and I'll show you a couple of mine. In fact, my list of a couple of sampling of current projects that I have with client organizations now include one that is talking about transitioning an account manager, right? When you transition account managers, some account manager left the organization or got promoted, now there's going to be a new account manager, and what they are asking is, how can we make the first meeting with the client smooth? And isn't that the case where you got to know not just what your new sales agent is thinking, but also what is that client thinking, in order to make that go very smoothly. We've got another one where invoicing, right? They have some complex invoicing. This particular organization has an invoice that can be quite complex, many line items, maybe difficult to read. I have always asserted, ever since my days in working at an insurance company, which also can be an invoice that is fraught with difficulty in translation, that the invoice is a significant touch point with your customer, and you're not in the room to defend it. You're not in the room to explain it, right? So it can be a source of frustration, and you're not there. So I think that that's something very important. So we're working on the design of the invoice itself and the invoicing process to make this touch point more positive with their customer. And then, as I mentioned before in the example, and I'll show you a picture of this one too, this e-commerce, this browsing, selecting, shopping, purchasing, experience with an online customer whom you may not know. You may already have a relationship, or it might be somebody out in the white space who's looking for something from you for the first time. Right? So it doesn't always have to be a product. It doesn't always have to be a shopping cart. This IDEO organization, I'm pretty sure that they actually designed the first mouse for Apple also. So they have a long reputation. And I just got a note from them today. Actually, I don't think it was a note. It was something on LinkedIn. Yeah, it was something on LinkedIn where they're offering free classes on design thinking, free classes on how to be a design thinking facilitator. So there goes my whole presentation. I'm trying to say, here, these are some tips on how to make this accessible to all of us, the 100 of us who are on this call. And then IDEO is going to just offer free classes. So yeah, go ahead and use those. You don't have to listen to me. An important first step in design thinking, in the design thinking project, and design thinking really, I got an unmet need, or I have something that I need to improve. I have an unmet need I'm trying to address, or I have something that I'm trying to improve, right? Which is we all have a situation like that at some point. So I want to design something, human-centered design. I want to make something better that incorporates my customer. Well, a customer journey map is a great way to start. Customer journey map, and I'll give you a little bit of a step-by-step on early days of constructing a customer journey map, because this is also not something where you have to have a degree in customer journey mapping, right? You don't have to have the customer journey mapping master certificate to be able to do this. Anyone can do this. It needs to be used, and it's got to be accessible. So I'm trying to make an attempt to make it more accessible. But we don't want to guess what our customer's opinion is. So it is always a good idea. I'll put this additional caveat there. It's always a good idea to talk with the customer, the actual customer. More on this to come here in just a second. So the customer journey maps can take on a lot of different views. I always recommend starting with your process map. Just start with your process map, even if it's at a high level. Explore itineraries, book a tour, pre-tour, during tour, post-tour, right? That's pretty high level. That's not really even that's more of a kind of a SIPOC or a high level, map. But at least start with a process, step by step, and then build in. What are those touch points with the customer? What are that customer, as I mentioned a second ago, not just what they're doing, but what are they thinking? What are they feeling? Because that's going to give you a much better idea of how to cement that relationship. So here's a picture of one that's pretty bare bones, and there's been a lot of different types of journey maps. Symbols, the smiley face or the frowny face, the graphics, they can help to tell the story, but this is still, this is still kind of generic. What are they doing across the top, if you can read that? Then what are they thinking and what are they feeling, right? Again, the common thread will be thinking, what are they thinking and what are they feeling while they're doing what they're doing? And then a bit of an evolution, and I just plucked this one from somewhere out in the open source. But we start to add a person's name, Linda. It's not just the generic customer. This is Linda, right? This is Linda. Like putting a picture of the person who's buying the truck on the truck while it's going through the assembly line. We still got smiley faces that are kind of doing their emotion map. But what are they doing under activities, and what are they thinking and feeling is still here. Right? And then it evolves a little further. Now there's a picture of Sarah. It's the persona, right? Let's write the persona. Now Sarah is moving her family. She knows she's going to need a phone and internet service, right? So we're trying to write the persona. We're talking to the actual kind of person that would need our service. If you haven't seen it, if you have already seen this, thank you for bearing with me. But if you haven't seen anything like this, writing the persona, writing the person who is your customer or your potential customer helps you to get grounded into what are they thinking, what are they feeling while they're doing what they're doing. And then, kind of this is my last one that I'm going to show, but this includes the emotional map on the expectations. A little quote. This is not a real person. John Quincy is a made up, it's a fictional person, right? But it represents the frequent business traveler that this organization is going at. So again, the common thread on all these: what are they doing while they research travel, research the website, book the flight? Also, what are they thinking and what are they feeling? Because this is going to help us cement better connection and expose the frustrations, the opportunities for improvement, and the unmet needs that we're trying to address. Cool. So customer journey map, I know we can only scratch the surface, but it is the purpose of customer journey mapping is with empathy, identify opportunities for improvement. In that customer journey map, I recommend that you start with your own process map. There are others who will not say that. There are others who will say, no, you can't start with your own process map because it's going to put your own blinders on it, and you're only going to be going through this, with your own point of view. Well, that's what the line is for. If you write your process map and keep that those elements that the customer is participating in, move those above the line, right? Above this kind of notional red dashed line. Above the line is what we refer to as things that are visible, steps in the process that are visible to the customer or where the customer is taking part. Below the line are those activities that happen that are not visible to the customer. They are internal to our organization, but they are happening. If you map from left to right through time, if you map in time from left to right, they're going to be mapped in the sequence that they occur. So it can give you a real good sense for what predecessor tasks and successor tasks need to be in place in order to drive this customer experience. So a picture of this might look like this. This is our nurse Regina. This is our persona here in this e-commerce transaction. And this is not completely filled in. It starts to get kind of small. But in my customer journey mapping kind of format, I got the line in the middle. It's represented in blue. The sales rep activity and the customer activity is above the line. And I'll put red dots where there's an opportunity for improvement. And my little smiley faces are things that, I'll say my little smiley faces on the customer journey map, those are things that if we get the chance, we want to validate with a real customer. If we want to actually interview customer individually or a little focus group and ask them to validate the points, the assumptions, and the statements that we're making. For instance, overwhelmed by options. It's easy to be in a conference room and say, when they visit our website, they feel overwhelmed by options. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not. Let's talk with customers and actually get their statements, their sentiment on that. Okay, so it doesn't have to be complex. Simple is usually better. This is a pretty simple one right here. But the points that I have listed up above in italics up above include the persona. Put the persona right on your process map. The customer's activities, the touch points that you have with that customer. Where are the places where we are able to interact with that customer? Is it on the phone? Is it in person? Is it on a website? Is it on a chat? The listening posts then are kind of a derivation of touch points. What are the ways we're able to get feedback? Not always are we in direct contact with that customer when we're getting their feedback. It might be comments, it might be Yelp, postings, it might be a complaint, it might be word of mouth, right, or somewhere else in social media. We list those pain points, and our activities belong on the journey map as well. That is my position, is that you map the process, what we're doing, and what the customer is doing at the same time. If you've done anything like that, I'd be interested in hearing your stories. If you put them on my Scrumbler site, that'd be great. Just keep the personally identifiable information probably off the card, because it is not a secure website. It's out there. Somebody could type in a random string and letters and numbers and arrive at our Scrumbler site. So not to make you afraid, I'm the only one who's going to be looking at it. Is highly unlikely anyone even knows it's out there. About the journey map. Now, the journey map is here, and we want to turn this into a new service, right? Maybe a new product, maybe a new service. How am I going to get there? I've got a suggestion, right? With the customer journey map, if we can, as I mentioned, invite customers to the workshop. Actually, I don't think I did mention that. There have been many times I've been running a Kaizen event or a process improvement workshop where we actually invite the customer, to come to it. Maybe not for the duration, maybe not for the whole time, but at least at the beginning to get their points firsthand, to get what's important to them and what they are missing and what they like. Because if they tell us what they like, it might be a hidden strength. We might not have even known. We might not have even known that it was something they liked. And if they tell us something that they don't like, it could have been a blind spot. We might not have known. So getting there at the top of this scale, inviting the customer to the workshop, is a thorough way to get their firsthand input, even if it's negative. A little bit further down the scale is bringing some recent voice of the customer information into the workshop. a recent marketing study, and I say marketing study is a little less than voice of the customer because it's usually broader. Marketing study tends to be broader. If I'm wrong about that and your marketing studies are much more pointed, I apologize. It's not intended that way. But the voice of the customer, is typically interviews, and the marketing study might be focus groups or even broader. And then at a minimum, at the bottom of this scale, at a minimum during this workshop, at least put yourself in your customer's shoes. At least take your, your company hat off, your organizational hat off for a second and say, if I were shopping, if I were interacting with us, how would I feel? What would I be thinking? Right? So we're trying to build empathy. The customer journey map helps to build empathy, which was point 1 in design thinking. Get an understanding of what's important to our customer. So here's my advice in getting started in such a workshop. I mentioned the Baldrige criteria is a series of questions. How do your senior leaders lead? How do you engage your customers? How do you engage your workforce? Any guesses as to how many questions are in the Baldrige criteria? No? A little more, a little more. Actually, I'm not seeing any answers. I'm kind of talking to myself. There are, and it depends on the version you're looking at. I think in the most current version, 106 total questions. Can you believe? Oh, there's 1,000. I see. I heard 1,000. That's an awfully big number. 106 total questions. So it can take a little while to go through that. What I'm recommending, what I'm going to recommend, are specific questions that will help in this context, right? Because the Baldrige evaluation is a comprehensive examination of the whole department or the whole company, depending on the company size. But for us, for a customer-focused design thinking workshop, there are 19 questions that I think will help you frame your workshop, right? I'm going to try to keep these up so you can, screenshot them real quick if you want to, screen clip. But then also, I'm sure that, Chris, I think we talked about these slides being available, a PDF of these slides being available after this workshop somewhere on the inspection division site, or I'm not sure about that. But whatever it takes, I want you to be able to have access to this subset.
Yeah, what we could do is, like, if you send them to me afterwards, we could put a link underneath the YouTube video for people to download the PDF right off your website.
Okay, very good. One way or another, we will make sure that you have these. Thank you, Chris. So what I want to show you, of the 6, I'm going to talk about the 6 process elements, not the results elements. I'm kind of pushing that aside for right now. The 7th is the results. I'm going to talk about the 6 process elements. Here are the first few questions. Within 1, leadership, and 2, strategic planning. These are the questions that I recommend. There are a lot more questions there, but just grounding you always in what are your organization's mission, vision, and values, and how are they shared and reinforced by senior leaders. These are the kind of things that you don't ever want to stray away from, right? How do your senior leaders practice ethical behavior? I put this one in here just to be careful, just to be safe, because I mentioned a minute ago that the I in ADLI is for integration, right? And integration means 360 degrees, right? Let's make sure we're not doing something that is in conflict or in isolation from the rest of our organization, right? And one of the things that should never be compromised is ethical behavior. So these 2 I put there as kind of starters, just starters, just something to keep in mind as you're going through this workshop. Some of these 19 are a lot more relevant, but those 2 I would never want to lose sight of. Number 2, process element is strategic planning. There are myriad questions in here, but the one that I think I would really single out are what are your organization's key challenges and advantages, and why I separate this one and why I ask this one of the groups that I'm helping to facilitate are advantages. What are your differentiators? What are the things that you really excel? What do we really excel at doing? We want to bring attention to that, right? There might be hidden strengths that we know of that are hidden from our customers and from our prospects, and we really want to highlight those and get them in front of that prospect as early in this life cycle as possible, and not make them a pleasant surprise later, right? If there's something that we can really use as a differentiator, we want to do that. These 3 questions I think are helpful. I'm going to advance the slides. There are going to be 3 more slides of these Baldrige questions because I wanted them to be nice and big on the screen. So this is the second one, starter questions number 2. These next 2 slides are all about process element 3, customer focus. So I wanted to call this one out. we're going to go into not just the basic criteria questions, but also the overall and the multiple requirements within Baldrige. But the customer-focused category examines how your organization engages its customers for long-term success, right? Engagement strategy, collect the voice of the customer, and customers help you identify opportunities for improvement. So that there are two overall requirements within customer focus, and the first is customer expectations. Now, these questions are from the 2019-2020 Baldrige criteria, so they're very current. I hope I didn't botch any of the wording throughout this whole thing, but these are the most current versions. And these two in blue refer right to the listening posts. What we're talking about is listening posts. How do we collect that voice of the customer? So number one, how do you listen to, interact with, and observe customers to obtain actionable information? Here's a question for you. Do customers always tell you the honest truth? Good heavens, no. A lot of times they will, sure, they'll shoot right from the hip, or they'll tell you exactly what's on their mind, but many times they will tell you something that's not exactly true. So not only do you have to listen to, but you have to observe what their behavior really is. They might tell you safety is most important, but then go and buy the one that's less expensive, even though its safety ratings are not as high. Okay? So you have to prove that, right? So we're going to listen to and observe those customers. This is something you want to do prior to a design thinking workshop, if at all possible. Let's go talk to those customers. Let's interact with them. Let's see them in their natural habitat. And let's observe how they behave with regard to our product and others in our marketplace. How do you listen to potential customers? This is not current customers, but potential customers to obtain actionable information also, right? So we want to look at the prospects that we have and talk to them. Next to, how do you determine your customer groups and market segments? How do you determine who you're even going after? Right? Do we know who our customers are? And is it the same as it was a year ago? Or has another segment emerged, who are using us? Did you ever read the story, it's in the Innovator's DNA book by Clayton Christensen, Innovator's Prescription book by Clayton Christensen, about the milkshake, the milkshake story, that there was a fast food chain, quick response restaurant chain that was selling milkshakes, that found that they were selling milkshakes in the morning. Like as soon as they were opening, they were selling milkshakes, and they were perplexed at why milkshakes were so popular on the morning menu. And so they asked a customer, actually had the chutzpah to ask a customer, hey, how come you're buying this milkshake? And they asked that one, and they asked a few more, and what they found out was that it gets them through the morning. These commuters who are going to work, that a milkshake is thick enough to get them through the morning and help them not feel hunger pangs as they're sitting at their desk or in meetings in the morning on their way to lunch. It helped them get, it was totally unexplored territory. They had no idea. So this is the segment, the business commuter, not who they thought was buying milkshakes. And how do you determine your product offerings? Again, just asking, what is our method for determining what we're going to offer? Because it might need to change if we start listening to our customers. So I've allowed a lot of time on this page. I'm going to move to the next. I'm not going to read all these questions to you henceforth. I'm just going to kind of clip through this a little more quickly. The second overall requirement in the customer process category is customer engagement. How do you build and manage customer relationships? How do you prepare to meet future needs? And the like, culminating with how do you use voice of the customer and market information? Not just how do you collect it, but how do you learn from it and deploy it? Okay. So there's some more questions that would be helpful in getting started. So this list of questions, here's one more page of questions. I'm going to advance this slide one more time to the final thought starter questions. These are from process categories 4, 5, and 6. How do we evolve continuous improvement and innovation? How to assess our workforce capability and capacity needs, right? Because if we got new customer needs, we're going to have to make sure that our team can support them. And then how do we minimize, I can't go into any workshop without saying first time quality, right? How are we going to make sure that we get things done right the first time? Always a bad experience when you don't get something done right the first time. And then how do we manage cost efficiency and effectiveness? Because once again, if this is our last question, sure, we know what the customer wants, right? We figured it out. So all we got to do is deliver it. Are we going to spend all our money delivering it? Are we going to be gold plating everything because that's going to get us the goodwill that we need? We're going to spend all of our money and we're going to be out of business by trying to meet those customer needs. So that last question refers to the balance of our customer, getting our customer what they need and making sure that we can sustain the business. So this is the Baldrige thought starter questions that I recommend to begin customer journey mapping exercise and a design thinking workshop. What's the value of Baldrige again? I promise I'm not trying to sell Baldrige. I am trumpeting Baldrige as a great program and a great way to look at your organization, a great lens through which to look at your work, because it's thorough and it stresses innovation. Innovation, I think, is the third most frequently occurring word in the Baldrige criteria, other than definite and indefinite articles. After process and results. I think it's process, results, and then innovation throughout the whole thing. In 2015, I wrote an article in the Quality Management Forum within ASQ, 4-page article. I really enjoyed writing this. It was a Baldrige approach to business consulting. Right? I was kind of a couple years into consulting, and I had started as a Baldrige examiner in 2010. And had been through a few cycles and had really learned that this makes a difference. It really is valuable. So I took a pass at applying it, and I loved it. And I still do it to this day when I'm talking with an organization about what are we going to do? Okay, how are we going to do it? And how are we going to learn from it? Measure it and integrate it. Right. So I posted this 4-page article at my.asq.org at MyASQ in the Innovation Division community, if you want to take a look at that also. I'm trying to give you some things, in addition, some things to, multimedia approach. Multimedia approach, Chris, that's what we're going for tonight. So I'm a believer in Baldrige if I haven't proven that already. So now I promised a little bit about collecting ideas, but I didn't think that I would have the time, and indeed I don't, to go into a lot of brainstorming or specific exercises. If we had a longer session, I might have gone into a couple of things, but here are a few tips, especially now that most more meetings now anyway, are taking place over virtual formats, right, in a virtual setting. You got to realize, if you're the facilitator, even if you're not the facilitator, but the facilitator certainly has to realize at any given time, roughly 10% of the audience is not paying their full attention. Let's say that again. At any given time, 10% or more of the audience is not paying their full attention for whatever reason, some distraction, some interruption, or maybe they're really captivated by the thing that you said a minute ago and they're still ruminating on how they can apply that in their daily life, and they haven't moved on to the next topic with you. So these are my tips for this, and one is repeat important points. I've already done that several times in this session. Repeat the things that are important, because if you say it once and say if they didn't get it, tough luck. That the value is not there. You've got to repeat those points. Post important points at the top of the screen, whether you're in a room or on a virtual setting. Whatever that important point is, put it at the top of the screen. So no matter where the conversation goes, especially on those that are interactive, I know this is a little bit one-sided tonight, because you can get lost in the discussion and kind of need to get grounded back into what were we talking about? Oh, collecting many ideas. Make it visual. Use visual aids on the screen to drive the topic. Break out people into smaller groups. It's harder to hide. It's more easy to contribute sometimes. You can engineer who goes into those groups, or you can make it random. Using small groups and then having them come back and present their ideas that they came up with as a small group can also be very fruitful in coming up with a lot more ideas and help you avoid group think. Don't ask too much at one time. Ask bite-sized, manageable pieces. Don't ask everybody to say, okay, how are we going to improve everything we do? Instead, how are we going to improve the first time somebody goes to our website? And then also, give them something to do when they're not watching you. Understanding that they might not be paying attention, put them on an exercise. Put them on a separate exercise. Give them a survey to complete, like our innovation style self-assessment. Or maybe take them to a Scrumbler board, which our site for today. I'm going to do this. So here I'm going to take a chance. Chris, I'm going to take a chance. I have not looked. You've seen what's been on my screen. I have not looked at the Scrumbler site. I'm going to go there. I'm going to go there now. I'm going to pull the veil off at the same time for everybody, and we will see what everybody says. It could be very disappointing for me. I might be crying here in a minute, but we're gonna take a chance. We're gonna take a chance. So I'm gonna share my Scrumbler site and see if anybody did anything. Here we go. Here's a couple things. Pretty sure I'm not the target audience for this webinar. I am terribly sorry. Bringing innovation to life. Great seminar with seminal questions. Good, very good. ADLI, helpful, good. See, this is good stuff right here. Baldrige is my favorite. Big fan of Baldrige. Put yourself in the customer's shoes. Great, very good. See, this Scrumbler site, haven't touched Baldrige over 5 years. Not sure I'm comforted or worried by that. This one kind of disappeared off me. By the consistency, yes. So this is good, and I will keep this. A webinar title did not match my expectations. This is, okay, so truth in advertising, innovation leadership in 2020, and here I am talking about design thinking. Maybe there's a mismatch there. I encourage you, you can continue to post to this. Scrumbler.ca is available for you to use as well. I've used it several times. Here's another picture of one that I did. I played a My Worst Nightmare game with an organization before, and we did just a little tester. I see a dog at McDonald's. What is the worst thing that can happen there? Right, so you continue to do that. I will be very happy to continue on this for the next 7-ish minutes. I'm going to go back to my slideshow and continue here. So thank you very much for giving me some ideas, some feedback on the webinar at the Scrumbler sites. Further, let me just go a little bit further. Who should be, right? We've talked a little bit about what and a little bit about how. Let me give you some who. Who should be in these workshops? Well, we have been saying from the beginning, since 2009, really, when the innovation division was just getting started, is that there are 4 main types, 4 main persuasions within what's required for innovation. I mentioned before, about a half an hour ago, that innovation is equal parts creativity and execution, right? So you have to come up with something new and then deliver it. So there are 4 kind of preferences, right? Persuasions within the innovation cycle. And the first is the creator, and there's a little bit of creator in all of us. In some, there's more than others. We all have elements of all 4 of these. And if any of you took the self-assessment over this last hour, you would see your final score, right, of whether you emerged to have the highest number in one of these categories. So the creator has that creative spark. Ooh, here's an idea. Ooh, here's an idea. Ooh, I got another idea. The connector is then the one who can connect, as the name implies, that idea to a possible solution. Not just an idea, not just a spark, but how can I actually monetize that? How can I actually bring it to my market? How can I help use this idea to make somebody's life easier, or to develop a new solution? So that top half really is the creative phase, creator and connector. Across the bottom are the developer and the doer. The developer takes what the creator and the connector have built, and by built, I use the term loosely. It could be just a sketch on the back of a napkin, right? It could be a very loose idea. The developer is the one who turns it into a plan, right, that can be replicated. And this link across the bottom is ASQ TV. We have, the ASQ TV, which I think is videos.asq.org. We have a couple of videos on there, and one of the ones that I'm in is Where Do You Fit in the Innovation Cycle, where we go over this. So the developers are the ones who turn this into something that we can actually build, right, that we can actually develop, so to speak. And then the doers are those who push it across the finish line. I will absolutely bring this to market. I will deliver this. And there's some of each of these, as I mentioned, in all of us. And if you took the self-assessment, and I encourage you to take it and retake it and take it from, from your desktop and share it with others, all of us should be a part of these design thinking workshops. Because if in the design thinking workshop, all we have are creators and maybe connectors, that's great. We'll have a lot of ideas. We'll have sticky notes all over the walls with ideas, but nothing will get done. They'll just be ideas, right? Nothing will get delivered. And if all we have in the room are developers and doers, we might get 1 or 2 ideas that we can really, really thoroughly pursue, but there might have been some more ideas that we missed, right? So we want to have representatives from all 4 of these groups. Typical ASQ profile, we tend to have a lot of connectors. We have a fair number of developers and doers. Creators, really, not that we're not creative. It's not that we're not creative. It's just you have to choose. That self-assessment is a forced ranking. So one of these will bubble to the top. And most of the time, we find that it is connector, somebody who is seeing something either in a different environment or when someone brings an idea up to you, you're able to parlay that into something of value. We do have a lot of that, but not saying that anybody is exclusively one and not the other three. You know, we all have elements of all of those. So here's my step-by-step recommendation. We'll call it a prescription. And I take seriously that note that said that the title didn't match my expectations, and I'm very sorry for that. Innovation Leadership in 2020. In an hour, what I chose to focus on is this in this first module, and maybe we'll be able to continue this series. Is this design thinking? Innovation leadership, design thinking is very topical right now, and as well it should be. It's produced a lot of great successes. So my recommendation is observe or interview actual customers first. Right, do that so you can understand what they're saying, what they're doing, how they're behaving, and then use ADLI as your guide. So not only do you say what your approach is, but also ensure that you're going to be able to, or have been, deploying it, learning from it, and integrating it throughout the organization. Build your team, as we just talked about a second ago, with all types of people: creators, connectors, developers, doers. If you use DISC, make sure you have somebody from a D, I, S, and C. If you use Myers-Briggs, in your organization, have people from all type indicators in your group. 4 is something I strongly recommend. Map the process from your point of view, then add the customer journey. There are those who will diss that idea, that say, no, you got to start from the customer, through the lens of the customer first. I say start with yours. Bite-sized journeys, as I mentioned, Baldrige starter questions that we said, generate lots of ideas because you can combine them, and don't let perfection get in the way of usefulness. So this is what I prescribe. What I'm trying to do tonight, to anybody who wrote any comments on the Scrumbler board or anybody else who has joined us, trying to make this accessible. I'm trying to make this something that you can take action on, not a theory or not something where you have to call in the design thinking group to help us come up with a new idea. Just a couple of things in closing. ASQ is still a strong resource for quality and innovation. The Quality 4.0 site, the URL is shown there, asq.org/etc. Lots of great stories, tools, articles, references on what's next. Where are we going next? What is this disruption? How can we practice some of this? So you can go to the site. You can talk to your local ASQ communities or go to the site. You can go to a conference as well. And this is hot off the press. These are the fall conferences for this year. Once the smoke clears and we're able to get back together again, the Inspection Division Conference then is in Utah in the 1st and 2nd of October. Audit Division Conference coming up in Florida also. This is our Innovation Conference is going to be in San Diego, October 22nd, 23rd. A little bit of bonus material on Sunday morning, the 24th also. And then hot off the press, I just got these dates today. Quality 4.0 Summit, which had been in November in Dallas for the last 3 years, is now going to be in San Antonio, September 28th, 29th, and 30th. So mark your calendar for any of those that might be helpful also. In a conclusion, at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, design thinking and customer journey mapping are not just reserved for specialists. We can do this. We can go out and do this. We just take this step by step, just dip your toe in the water, do it with somebody, create a journey map and design thinking workshop with the group that you trust first, and then branch out from there. The thought starter questions I do recommend strongly, as well as ADLI, from the Baldrige point of view. Innovation Division, very pleased to collaborate. If there's anything that we can do that would help, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll make ourselves available. Chris, I haven't had the Q&A tab open. I wonder if there's any questions or chat items that came in that I could maybe address in like 30 seconds.
Yeah, and now's the time. I just want to mention to participants, if you have any questions, please type them into the box. We've had some great audience participation. Tracy, you've done a great job presenting. You're a very energetic and engaging speaker, especially for this type of webinar.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very happy to hear that. I just want to deliver value, and if there's value to be shared among any of our value to be derived from any of our listeners, I'm happy with that. If there was a lack of value for anybody, I am truly sorry about that.
And just so everybody's aware, I'll wait a couple minutes and see if any questions come through, and I can read those off to you, Tracy. What will happen is after the webinar, everybody should receive an automated receipt with your CUs on it for the webinar, for attending the webinar. That way you'll get credit for it. We don't have to send out an email. It'll come out automatically from the WebEx application. And then what I'll do is after a couple days, I'll post the video on the YouTube channel. And then Tracy, if you send me the slides, I'll put a link to the slides right in the ASQ division website underneath your webinar. So it'll be recorded online on the YouTube channel, and everybody should be able to access the content from that point.
Okay, that's great. I think that'll work well.
Question came through, do you have a favorite template store to get customer journey maps or other resources?
You know, okay. Thank you for the question. Do I have, you know, a favorite resource? It is the simplest thing to build these in Excel. And I know probably somebody just groaned and said, oh my goodness, I can't believe you just said that. But Excel is accessible by absolutely everybody. Okay, I won't say absolutely everybody. Again, like, I mean, maybe there's somebody who doesn't have a Microsoft Office, you know, suite by choice or by limitation. But typically, I mean, just to make boxes in Excel is a super way to really expedient, prepare a really expedient customer journey map. And I do that on purpose. I mean, yes, I know we're on Visio and Lucidchart and, you know, several others. But I think just building it this way. When I post these, you'll be able to see, I don't know, at least one sample in the below the video.
Another question that came is, how do you create innovation mindset within an organization?
Short answer is build successes. Short answer is go build something. Because for me, I always, and this is something I'm not just talking off the cuff. This is my firmly entrenched belief because I've done it and seen others do it, and I've seen a lack of it lead to failure. And that is build successes. You can't say we're going to change the culture. That doesn't happen. That happens. Culture is a result of behaviors, and behaviors are a result of habits. So you start at that foundational level by changing habits, and habits, you know, at the micro level means build some success stories, build something, go do something, prove that this can work, adapt it to your own. This is my approach. Adapt it to your approach, and do something on a micro level, bite-sized level. Develop a success, develop another success. Someone is going to say, how'd you do that? And then you get the wonderful opportunity to show them.
So create like the small wins just to get the engagement.
Absolutely small wins. And I think, I mean, there are books and books. John Cotter, you know, has always talked about baby steps, right? And then consolidate gains and create more success.
Another question, what was the best aha moment for a client that underwent when you were working with them?
Okay, so I had a insurance company that did quarterly audits of all their sales regions, and they had 8 sales regions. And so that means 8 sales regions, quarterly audit. It was 2 years before they got back to you. So things are stale by then. It was a long process, right? The whole thing, it involved travel to their sites. An 80-page report was prepared at the end of it. It was crazy. And the aha moment that emerged during that design thinking workshop for how are we going to revise this this process, how are we going to make it smoother. It started out, let's make this simpler, let's streamline it. The aha moment was, we don't need this. We don't need this 80-page report. We don't need this invasive, quarterly audit that happens every 2 years. What we need is the essentials to be shared on a regular basis, a monthly basis. And all this other material needs to be centralized and accessible by everybody because it's going to be much fresher at that time. So by looking at, and you know why it happened, Chris? You know why it happened? We called them. During the workshop, we called these region managers. We didn't just use what we assumed to still be true. We called these region managers and we asked them out loud, out of this 80-page report, what's the most important part to you, right? Because you can't ask, do you read this? Do you read this 80-page report? Because the answer is, oh, sure we do, yeah. We said, what's the most important part? A couple of them said the executive summary is all I read unless something, you know, tragic has happened, and then I read that. One of them said, I skip right to page 18 or 19, wherever the graph is, right? So what did we start doing? The graph and the executive summary, right? That did, because all the rest of it was not being useful. It was, in lean terms, it was waste.
Excellent. That's a great answer. One last question. I know I appreciate everybody sticking around a couple minutes late. Another question came through, and I believe it's related to the customer journey map. It says, has you mapped it to Six Sigma DMAIC?
Okay, I don't map. Okay, this is I understand the question. I don't have a DMAIC framework in mind when building a customer journey map, because most of the time it was not provoked or prompted by a specific problem. It was more about an unmet need or exploring what we can do. If something comes in as a complaint, right, or as a trend of complaints or warranty, you know, issue, that's DMAIC, absolutely. You know, let's define what the problem is, measure the the magnitude of that problem, analyze for root causes, etc. But a lot of times a customer journey map is an exploration. It's not necessarily pointed at a deficiency. It's pointed at an unmet need, which is a little more difficult to quantify and qualify at the very beginning stages. So no, it's not my tendency not usually my tendency to start with the DMAIC framework. Now I do see Tom Quick on the call, and I absolutely endorse the Splitting the DMAIC book by Tom Quick, which is another way to really to use DMAIC, not necessarily the way the original textbooks ran, but to drive value to your organization by picking it apart into its elements. So there's still a lot of value. I absolutely am a DMAIC disciple, but in this case, that's not the framework that I enter into a customer journey map or a design thinking workshop with. I hope that's not too tautological an explanation right there.
It's a great explanation, Tom. Thank you. Are there any other questions? I really appreciate it. Like I said, you've done a great job. Thanks for sticking around a little bit later, Tracy. I know we're going through some rough times right now, and I got to give everybody shouts out who works in the quality world today for keeping pertinent businesses running. If you're still working, I know a lot of you have very critical jobs in today's applications, today's companies, so that's really important. We look forward to bringing you some other great webinars coming up soon. Thanks everybody for sticking around late. If you have any closing comments, Tracy?
None, just except for gratitude. Thank you very much.
All right, with that being said, we'll wrap up today's webinar event. It is recorded, so I will stop the recording, and probably within the next couple days or so, I'll have it up on the YouTube channel. And then if you just want to send me over your slides, Tracy, we'll get those posted as well.
Right on. Have a good night.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.